Hello, hello. Am
How
I
are
gonna get
you?
I'm good. How are you? Am I gonna get to see you in real life?
Oh no, I'm not dressed.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm
Such a
gonna have a.
tease. Damn
Yeah, I
it.
know.
I'm just gonna have to look at myself. Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, well that's half the battle one, isn't it?
Indeed.
Actually, I wanted to tell you a little story to get started about what I'm wearing. Um, it's my grandmother's negligee that she wore on her wedding night. It's been
Oh,
through a lot
that's
since then.
that's kind of weird, isn't it?
It is weird. And
I'd say Oedipal, but you're the wrong gender for that.
yeah, no, I know. I don't know what the Freudian interpretation would be, but it was actually given to my sister. My grandmother liked my sister more than me, and I was so jealous of it because to me it represented the feminine. My grandmother was a romance writer. She wrote 52 historical romances, and they were all about these big-breasted women fighting in wars and just being really amazing. And I thought she was incredible. And so I wanted the negligee because to me it was a symbol of the feminine that I couldn't get my hands on.
Right. How interesting.
I don't know what you make of that, but I was reading your book. I thought, well, maybe we're all interested in the feminine, really.
I have a theory on that, and I think it seems like the more evolved people get, the more interested in feminine they are. I mean, I think
Hmm.
the feminine is archetypally is energy, and maybe everyone is only sexually aroused by the feminine. Certainly, heterosexual men are, but most
Mhm.
women, I think, you know, appreciate other women's sexual energy and beauty, and
Yes.
maybe they get activated in their horniness by feeling feminine and taken and
Mm.
desired, and the masculine is there that invokes that and provokes that.
Hmm.
Certainly true for me anyway, so maybe I'm projecting, but it's a
Well, yeah,
theory.
it's true for me too. But I think, why not? Why not go with what's true for us for now? I mean, everything's subjective, for fuck's sake, right?
Yeah,
So, I think, yeah, for me, it's polarity. The man or the masculine position is what I get to feel my femininity against. So what's really turning me on
exactly.
is femininity, but they provide the perspective. Otherwise, I'd be lost, I suppose.
Yeah, that's exactly my viewpoint as well. It's the the sluttiness of the feminine when she's
Mm,
fully given, when she's not ashamed, when she's
mm,
in her full blooming fullness is, I
mm.
think, what is sexy, obviously to heterosexual men, but maybe also to women as well in themselves. So
Yes, yes, that sort of letting go. And I was actually interested to read about your reclaiming of the word slut, and I enjoyed that. And it's funny, a while ago I met this really edgy artist, and she was making these really cool jewelry pieces that were like cunt, slut, all these words. And at first I was really like, I didn't get it because it just felt cruel to me. Like the word cunt felt cruel and the word slut felt cruel. And then as I've sort of explored this this journey that I feel like, we're taking, whether or not we're interested in it, collectively, this sexual revolution, it makes a lot of sense to bring a lot of light to these shaming words. Do you think that we should reclaim all of them?
well, I mean, in the past, they have been used as derogatory words and should not be
Yeah.
used as derogatory words because they're very powerful words. Call
Mm.
someone a cunt or a whore or
Yeah.
whatever is a horrible, horrible thing to do and
Hmm.
should not be. Now, obviously, women, when they get strong and independent, women are obviously as intelligent as men. There's a lot of scientific facts on that. Women can do, especially in the first world countries, women can do everything that men can do now, with a bit of pay gap and things that still to be resolved. But other than that, there's nothing really women can't do that men can do. So we're at a stage now where strong women are able to reclaim these words, and they're sexually very powerful words. I mean, in my experience, every woman, if she's honored and respected and loved and cherished, you know, so on, there is a point where, you know, that will get boring. If she's just got the nice guy, caring and sweet all the time, we all want that. But if that's all that's on the menu, it becomes rather boring and rather muted. In countries that are very developed, like Sweden's a very developed country, you know, there's a lot of very bored, strong women and very neutered men that are afraid to dance with the strong polarities. And to be honest with you, I've never met a woman when they're being honored and, you know, respected, that at the end of it, there's a yoga in the divine slut where a woman can, if she's to really let go, where she's to let go of her ego contraction, her kind of masculine head strength. There's a point where she really wants to, and, you know, it's a strong way of saying, but she really wants to be fucked like a dirty little slut and be allowed to act that out without shame. That is, it's not a personal thing. It seems to be an archetypal energy in all sexually liberated women. They will eventually get to that point. And as I said in my book, every woman, when they do these final yogas, when they know how to orgasm on the cervix and the womb for 5 to 20 minutes at a time, every woman, in my experience, is built exactly the same. There is zero variation at that extreme level of yoga, which very few women will ever experience. But every woman operates exactly the same. On the surface, there's multiple differences, but at the end, every woman seems to open up in that archetypal way.
She's
And
always a woman.
she's always a
Always a
woman at the
woman
end.
to me.
Always
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and that's why, in some ways, I've got a little bit bored with the kind of heterosexual sex of being the man and fucking the woman open to God. Because once you learn the mechanics of it, once you learn how to really master sex, it's actually not that complex. It's not very easy. I mean, it took me years and years, but it's actually quite simple. The uterus, the cervix, the way that it energetically opens up seems to be identical for every woman. And once you learn to put that key in that lock, it's actually rather simple. And that's where I think most men, they might think they're good lovers or something. But once you really learn to master the mechanics of sex, once you learn to be able to contain the fullness of the sexual energy that a woman produces, which is enormous energy. I mean, most women are holding back constantly in sex, and they're never able to fully let go. Because if they really open their sexual energy, it's like a waterfall, and the man will, you know, ejaculate and spasm orgasm straight away, and every woman knows then it's game over for a certain period of time with that man. So they learn to hold back, or they don't know how to fully let go because they have armoring in the cervix and so on. But once they are able to let go, if the man can take that energy through his body, circulate it through his whole spine and through his body, and then feed that back to the woman, you know, she can open into temporary enlightened states, satori states, rather easily, which there's no other real way to do except through ethanogens. This is a natural way to do that, to really take a woman into the God domain temporarily for, you know, several hours at a time. And once you hear women go, oh my God, that's the best sex that I've ever had, I can't believe that. I mean, I feel like the innocence of a child and the sluttiness of the divine whore, and that's the best sex I've ever had. And once you've heard that from hundreds of women, it kind of gets a bit boring.
It's so funny. I think this, you know, in a nutshell, you're saying you found God and it's boring.
Not that. No, not at all that. No, that you found a temporary way to open those channels into the divine sexuality. So the ego's interest in showing that you're a good lover, which I think nearly every man has in his core, is he wants to you know, prove to himself and the world he's a master lover. Now, very few men will ever get to that.
I get
men
that.
are paid, €10,000 or whatever to have
I
sex
get
with
that.
them for
It's a
20
very
minutes.
particular thing you're talking about, getting to the end of this kind of egoic journey with sex. It's like you've learned how to pull the string on the party popper. It
Exactly.
pops.
That's it.
So that brings me to, I guess, the bit I'm more interested in, and this is, I'm doing sex, psychics, and psychedelics on this podcast because to me the intersection of the three is what's interesting, which is how do we access neuroplasticity and then use that to create? I guess that's the aspect of sex I'm most interested in because it's sexual
Yes,
energy.
it
And
is.
can we talk more about that? Like, are we accessing neuroplasticity? How do we know that we're accessing it? And then what would be the optimal way to work with it?
Well, from the outset, let me state that I'm not a scientist. I
Yeah.
refer to scientists. We're lucky to have a couple of double PhD scientists and
Hey, can you
sexologists
backtrack
and people who have worked.
2 sentences, Alexa? Because I lost your last 2 sentences. Something went funky with the recording.
Right. I'm lucky to have access to double PhD scientists and sexologists, people who do have a scientific background. So I'm just repeating what they're saying.
Yeah.
And what I'm told is the fastest way and the most concrete way to get an example of neuroplasticity is rewiring the nerves that you can have sexual pleasure on. 99.9% of women are orgasming on their clitoris, which is the pudendal nerve, and it's a very loud and strong signal. It gives that 5 to 10-second intense spasm orgasm in the clitoris. That nerve, the pudendal nerve, is the same nerve that men orgasm on through the penis. Pudendal actually in Latin means to be ashamed of, which is really strange.
Very fascinating.
We're actually learning shame through the pudendal nerve. And I think a lot of people, when they were children and they had their innocent sexuality and were playing doctors and nurses, didn't really experience shame until we started to orgasm in that, pudendal nerve orgasm. And, I'm not anti-clitoris by any stretch of the imagination, but that particular orgasm, it stops any other deeper orgasms, and women can have 7 different kind of orgasms, 6 other different kind of orgasms. It blocks the ability for the other nerves, the pelvic floor nerve, the vagus nerve, these other nerves in the body from being able to receive those signals. So we always say women have a hiatus from the clitoris at least for a year. Just stay away from the clitoris. And
That's a
will allow,
recommendation to stay away from the clitoris.
yeah, and that will fairly quickly allow the neuroplasticity of the brain to rewire itself and to be able to feel like the hypogastric nerve, and be able to create a lot more intense and sustainable pleasure without any downside to this other short orgasm. Besides shame, there's other kind of effects that it has on the body, which it may be the reason that the vagina is kind of hardened and there may be pain in the cervix. There's not meant to be pain in the cervix. You're not actually meant to have pain during childbirth. That is that something is wrong with the woman's reproductive system that creates that pain. For people who are into reading the Bible and things, it's actually written in there. Eve ate from the Garden of Eden. She ate the forbidden apple, the forbidden fruit, the tree of knowledge, and knowledge is the same word as sex in the Bible. She ate from the forbidden fruit from the tree of sex, and therefore she'll have pain during childbirth for all eternity. And the man shall walk around like a hungry ghost, never being able to fulfill himself.
Sweet
Who
deal,
knows
huh?
if that's true? Who knows
Sweet
if
deal.
that's true? Yeah.
We really have we have either set ourselves up or we've been set up. There's definitely a joke at the heart of all of this, and I must say I really appreciated the humor in your book, because I do think that certainly exploring in sex, you want to keep your sense of humor, or exploring in anything that for that matter. But yeah, back to this. So if sex is a way of getting into a state of neuroplasticity, I understand your angle, which is pursuing pleasure, right? Helping people find ways to kind of really extend and grow the pleasure journey. I guess I'm taking it to the question of, could we use sex and sexual energy to rewire our thinking or to manifest or to grow particular things? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I just to correct you a little bit on the pleasure thing.
Mm,
No, I'm not just about hedonistic pleasure. What I'm
mm,
about is controlling pleasure and not going for instant gratification. It's easy
yeah,
just to rub one out and
yeah.
get 5 seconds of pleasure. That's what I would call more adolescent or infantile sexual um, impulses, just to broadly with a paintbrush insult basically the whole of humanity's sexual current practices. Um, it's a very low level. I mean, humans are operating
Yeah.
an extremely low level of sexuality, and there is no blueprint up to this time of how to allow deeper um, development of humans through sexuality. Just going for instant gratification is not the answer if you really want to grow yourself. You have to be able to delay that pleasure, not go for the instant gratification, discipline yourself,
Mm,
which then can allow deeper um, pleasures in the body, which then open up neuroplasticity. And as I understand it, neuroplasticity
mm.
is not a state. Neuroplasticity is something that happens in the brain, and it's not a state, it's a trait. It's something that is
Ah.
long-term rewiring, hardwiring your brain, that is not a state. So it's kind of the opposite of the way you described it. And that,
You mean it's more of a result? Is that what you're
yes,
saying? It's a
it is a
result. It's
result.
not yeah, I'm seeing it more as this, because I guess this is more my sort of psychedelic angle on it, which is um, entering into a realm, more like a right brain realm where there are infinite possibilities.
Yes, so that's the state that is possible when you've had that trait of rewiring your brain to some extent through
I see.
neuroplasticity. And the more your more time you've given your brain to rewire through neuroplasticity, the more you are able to access those higher states of consciousness.
Mm, hmm.
And there, can be some um, resulting in correlation in the ability of development of thinking and cognitive abilities, although that's not so strong. And there's not a lot of evidence scientifically for that. So
Hmm.
there does seem to be some with estrogens, which I'm not an expert on, but
Yeah.
um, the way I see sexuality is most people have it wrong, and it will drag you down, and it will
Sex will drag you
your
down if you get it wrong.
current sexual practices, the normal way of
Hmm.
having sex, will drag you down.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
can disrupt the neurotransmitters, and it can create a flatness. That's been shown in rats and things. If you satiate a rat and it has infinite number of orgasms, there'll be a period of somewhere around between 2 and 3 weeks where it will lose its sexual interest.
Yeah.
And there is certainly evidence for that in humans. If you're
Mm-hmm.
over masturbating to porn and things,
Right.
and you're coming a lot,
Yeah.
that will actually decrease your sexual ability to feel a less sensitive pleasure over
Mm-hmm.
time.
Sure, sure. I mean, I think about porn a lot and what it's doing. I mean, I have two daughters, and they're growing up in a with a very different understanding of sex than me, because I didn't grow up in a world of porn. I mean, I found a couple of magazines under a bed.
Yeah, we're showing our
Once.
age, aren't we? I do too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel nostalgic. You know, we were like, I was at a boarding school and we were dry humping in the woods and we didn't know what was happening, but stuff was happening and it was cool, you know? And yeah, and now we're in a very different environment. And certainly I mean, I'm a like major empath. So when I see a lot of mainstream porn, it, I don't feel it. I see the performance of it, but I don't feel it and I don't feel pleasure. But I also get also a very visual person, and I get the visual stimulation, but I also feel that has become terrifically kind of crude and exaggerated, probably exactly because of that diminishing returns thing you're talking about. It's like the visuals need to shock you harder and harder to keep you interested, and it needs to be harder and it needs to be faster. And it's like, where the fuck is all of this going? And is there a way that we can wake up through porn, or is it more just like that's a dead end? I mean, how do you see it?
I'm not anti-porn. It's like everything. It's the way you use it.
Mm,
And there are, I mean, if you say generally yes, porn, it has a lot of negative side effects and can be rather derogatory to women and so on. I'm familiar with all that, but there can be a yogic use for porn, for example. So one way is through the technique of edging, which is people that are visually stimulated, which is majority of men and certainly women, but less so
mm,
generally. Um, you can find porn where the people are really enjoying it. I mean, being a gender fluid person, for me, the only sort of porn that I ever interested in is transsexual porn, because generally transsexual women do not have the same shame that women have around being slutty. Mummy never tells little boys don't be a slut. It's manly for the boy to go out and conquer and sow his oats and so on. So the transsexuals don't have a lot of
mm,
shame often around sex, so they can actually really enjoy it. And you can see with the transsexual if they're enjoying being fucked, because they have an erection, right? So
mm,
you can see if they're really enjoying it. Now, to watch porn like that where someone really is enjoying it, where both
yeah.
parties are really enjoying it, they're not faking it, so empathically you can feel them enjoying it. Edging is about masturbating to that sort of porn and then getting closer and closer to that point of no return without going over the edge. So
Mm,
for a guy or a woman rubbing her clitoris, you can stimulate the pudendal nerve and get closer and closer and get used to building up the capacity to feel that sexual energy through your body, and disciplining yourself to not take that instant
yeah.
gratification. So that
Yeah.
can be a yogic way to use porn in a healthy way.
Okay, just to clarify, and that could be whether you're doing it alone or in a couple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, makes a difference. Yeah,
Right.
it's all that
Right.
sexual yoga is about, the capacity to build up sexual energy and move that energy from the
Mm,
front of the body where it gets stuck, and move it backwards towards the tailbone. And if you've got your spine sexually activated, which the new Tantra does in its level 2 courses, then you can move that sexual energy up the spine. It happens actually by itself. And the key to doing that is to make sure there's no sexual blockages or tight areas of the body that can't feel sexual pleasure. And for most people, especially men, that's the anus. It's,
mm.
if you can't feel sexual pleasure in your anus, sexual energy cannot move backwards, get stuck in the front, you get sexually frustrated and may even create problems long term, just having it energy blocked in the front of the body. So
Wow, this is so fascinating. I feel like there's so many things I'd like to talk to you about. Can you tell me a bit about your journey into gender fluidity, or into identifying that in yourself?
yes, certainly. I grew up in Australia, and a very homophobic country,
Mm,
um, as a straight Australian male, and was very into women. And I mean, I was kind of obsessed with women. I would
mm.
used to walk up and down the airplanes looking for beautiful women to make an excuse to sit down and try and pick up. It was I was
This
very
was
obsessed.
before assigned seating.
Yeah, well, I would find ways to sit
You would
down or
actually
ask someone
over.
to move.
Oh, you're really good. I was like, God, you really
I
see.
used to have no shame. I was very into it. And that's, I've always been interested in meditation, spiritual things. I started
Mm,
meditating when I was 10 years old,
wow.
and I've always been interested in sex. And that's why it became interesting for me to find out Tantra and how to marry both of those things together. So I then started my tantric journey, went to India, studied with a lot of the most respected people in the world on Tantra. And after a few years, I started to be able to master it, and as I mentioned before, get to a point where I could move sexual energy in women fully, where they could fully open, have womb orgasms, which is the deepest orgasm that we've found, which is basically the full body orgasm, the womb orgasm, where the vagina will be doing very specific things. It will be contracting and bellowing. It will be farting and expelling air. It will be also often softly ejaculating on the penis. The woman will be often rolling her eyes back in her head, often in satori. I mean, it's a very, very intense orgasm, the womb orgasm.
When you say
And which all
satori, can you
exactly,
explain that
and
for the audience?
it's a temporary enlightened state where you lose the feeling of being stuck behind your eyes in separate consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have the that horrible feeling of always feeling separate from the world around you.
Yeah.
You feel, and you can actually sometimes even subtly see it, as if your consciousness behind your eyes is not separate from everything you're seeing, and it feels like you're looking at yourself. And when you look at someone else in their eyes, often you'll see this infinite blackness behind their pupils, and it'll feel like you're talking to another form of yourself. It's kind of like you're in a dream where you are the dreamer of everything, and you can kind of recognize yourself as in everything in the nature and the material around you. So that's a satori.
Beautiful. I
So
like that state.
yeah, so it's a very nice way to get it without having to go to ethogens or something
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
always has some kind of downside. Although I'm not anti-ethogens, but doing
Right.
it
But there's
naturally
always
is always
something
better.
though, isn't there, Alexa? Because
Yeah,
then, with sex, then you've got to sustain, the right partner, whether that's someone you practice with or not. People are complex. Stuff always gets in the way, doesn't it?
yep. There doesn't seem to be any sustainable way to do it, which is the
I
sad
think
bottom
I think
line.
being dead is the most sustainable way to
I
reach
totally
unified.
agree. I totally agree. I mean, the Tibetans have a theory that if you can sustain, enough satoris, and I've had several hundred,
Wow.
but they never last. Whenever you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning, you're back to your normal
Dead.
contracted, fucked up self. But the Tibetans say if you're able to have satoris when you're alive, at death, it's 7 times easier to do it at death. So maybe you're right, but no one's ever come back from death to be able to tell
It's
us.
7 times easier to reach satori in death if you've done it in
To,
life.
to, to, to actually get enlightened during sex. So they say. And
Yeah.
again, you can't prove all this stuff. So who
That
knows?
makes me think of this phrase. I don't know where it comes from, but it rattles around the psychedelics community, which is, if you die before you die, you won't have to die when you die. Da, da, da. So yeah, I guess, well, orgasms and death have always been closely allied, haven't they? The Le Petit Mort. But I guess you're describing
The
a bigger version of
petit
Le
mot.
Petit Mort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to go back to, I thought it was really fascinating that you said you got to the
Oh,
the
yeah.
pop
I
on the
didn't
button.
finish my
Oh,
story.
sorry, excuse me.
No, you're right. Yeah, I didn't finish I didn't get to
Yeah.
the gender fluid
Okay,
part.
we've got a few
We got sidetracked there,
I
right?
know, there are too many good bits. Okay, you
Yeah.
go.
So once I'd kind of done that, I kind of got a bit bored with the heterosexual thing.
Mm,
And then I got more interested, like, okay, so I've kind of, to whatever degree, I feel like I've plateaued mastering my masculine energy. Now I'd like to kind of I'd like to get into more my feminine side. Now that was quite interesting, being a heterosexual guy, um, that I found that, I can actually feel a whole different spectrum of energy being feminine. So I'd experiment with clothing and things.
mm,
And I found, I can get horny in a different way going into my feminine energy. So I'd experienced that, dressing up and being with women, and um, because I'd always has an interest in lesbian sex, which most men have an interest in,
mm.
watching lesbian porn. Most women masturbate to girl on girl lesbian stuff. There's very, very few that don't. It's a 2 or 3% that don't. But women never talk about it to each other because of the shame of that. Um,
Right.
so, then I thought, oh, I've always liked watching lesbian porn, but I'd much rather do it than just watch it. So
Mm,
then I
mm.
found that, I would kiss different, I would be sexual, I would touch different. It was much slower, much more sensual in the whole lesbian energy. And after a couple of years of that, then I'd found that, okay, what if I practice with men in my feminine? Now, being a straight guy, I wasn't really attracted to the male form. Um, but what I found is, which we touched on earlier, I
Mm,
could get horny on my own feminine
mm,
in juxtaposition to the man allowing me to feel more feminine. So I found I could get very horny with men being feeling more feminine through their presence and through the
mm,
sexually
mhm,
interacting with them. So, and then, just the whole idea of surrender. For
mm,
me, I'm as a man, if I go clothes shopping, it's like, buy a pair of jeans, in and out 5 minutes. That's a good shopping thing. Or three or four pairs of shoes. But in my feminine, I have so many dresses and earrings and shoes, and
mm.
because the feminine is a spectrum, whereas the masculine is always about depth. So
Yeah.
I found it was a whole totally different world to be in the feminine, and for me, it's much more interesting. And just from a purely mathematical point of view, it's much more fun being bisexual, because all of a sudden, one is half as good as two. You've got twice a bigger pool of people to be able to play with. So it opens up a
I
whole different
couldn't
world.
agree more.
Right.
When I first fell in love with a woman, which was a surprise, I was 39, and it
You
kind
don't
of
even look
blew.
39 now.
Oh, thank you, darling. It opened so much up for me, and one of the things that made me laugh about it was exactly what you were talking about. It was like, oh, well, not only is it double in the sense of like there's this whole other part of the population that is potentially online for you in this way, but well, I don't want to reinforce a horrible cliche, but like men in LA, and then women in LA, so
Right.
you've got yeah, I mean there's sort of in a way exponentially more choice if you go with this. If you find the female body beautiful, then yeah, that's um
Exactly. And
so
I
much
mean, I
more.
call myself polysexual because I'm also
Mm,
attracted to transsexuals as well. So
I
then
see.
you've
Yeah.
got, and that kind of sex is completely different to the other two as well. So there's a smorgasbord, there's a plethora
Mm,
of different opportunities, but it's all about transcending shame. And
mm,
that's
mm,
where, sexuality can have a spiritual component, in that it allows you to relax the self-image. Like me as a heterosexual man, that's a certain self-image or ego, right? Compared to me as a gender fluid person is a different, and
yeah.
being able to flow between those two somehow kind of loosens the ego in some way, that you don't have this rigid self-image
Oh
about
my
ourselves.
God.
So
I mean, it's so much more playful.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I mean, I can totally imagine that. And I sort of feel like if I could snap my fingers, I would do that myself. Like it doesn't feel like my path, but like, why the fuck not? But
right.
I mean, it sounds amazing, but also we are talking about yin and yang and everything having a shadow side. So is there a shadow side? I mean, there must be a gradient, right? You're opening so many different boxes and looking at sex from all of these different angles. What's the shadow side of that for you? What's the gradient you feel like you're sort of working?
Well, I don't. I think if you enter into these things consciously and try to improve yourself and try to give other people a good experience, and you're only entering consensual things where everybody is not only willing but also doing it with the right intention as well.
Mm,
I don't see a lot of downside. I mean, in anything, sex, there can always be addiction and
hmm.
going for too much pleasure and the hedonistic
Right,
impulses,
right.
and self-destruction, or the humiliating kind of things. I mean, for example, BDSM can be a very useful um, uh, way of playing with polarity, but there can also be some shadow side, unhealthy stuff if it's done in a very derogatory, demeaning way, which is acting
Mm,
out some childhood humiliation thing that the person gets off on. I think there can be a shadow side to that.
Yeah.
which I also mention in my book. But if it's done with good intentions to heal yourself, to improve yourself, these are very strong practice. The sexual energy is perhaps the strongest energy we have to play with. I mean, we can create life with
Right.
sex. Um,
Right.
so it can heal, but it also, it
It
can
can
also
burn. It's
be
fire.
destructive.
It's
Yes, it's
fire.
fire. So you have to be
Yeah.
careful, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had my explorations into polyamory. For me, that was something that I didn't feel would necessarily work, because what I noticed, and I'm, a sensitive, thoughtful person, so I'm not very good at ignoring things like dynamics between people or the parts that need healing. So I just felt like there was so much to be sorted through. Um, and it can consume your whole life, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't really know what to say about that, but I also really value the freedom and the skill sets that people who are taking on that lifestyle are learning, because they're stretching themselves in ways that generally heterosexual couples are not.
Yes, yes. And I relate getting your sexuality in order to oral hygiene. I'm not talking oral sex hygiene. I'm talking like brushing your teeth.
Uh-huh.
If you don't brush your teeth, you're going to have very serious problems. If you don't floss your teeth or whatever, you're going to have very serious problems, and you really need to get it right. But good oral hygiene, brushing your teeth and having clean teeth, does not inherently make you more spiritual or more enlightened, or even long term, really sustainably happy in a pure way. So I don't put a lot of stake on, sex as the answer to everything.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
it's just something to get right, and should be part of a healthy
Yeah.
person's sexual repertoire, but not, as you said, get obsessed with it and think
Yeah.
it's the answer
Yeah.
to everything.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, sort of bringing more awareness and more education and more different perspectives to sex. I was just thinking, there's no way of really knowing who's going to listen to this podcast, but my guess would be that a lot of people who are going to listen to this are not necessarily going to go out and become full-time tantra students, but they might love to read your book, and they might love to just take away a few tips from this. And I felt
Yeah.
that tip about edging, whether it's in masturbation or in a couple, felt like a kind of a user-friendly piece of tantra. Is there anything else you'd like to sort of add to that as a kind of like easy to access tip for the listener?
Yes, I would say the most useful, and especially for women, is to get their vaginas de-armored. Most women have a lot of numbness in the vagina, which doesn't allow them to really feel the penis without friction. Using friction during sex, we call friction only sex, is for beginners. It's for people who don't know any sexual yoga. There's a numbness in the vagina, which can be taken out, in half an hour through pressing the sides of the muscles in the vagina, pressing out all the sore and numb points. That can be fairly quickly done, and it only needs to be done once, maybe 2 or 3 times, maximum 3 times. The other part is the cervix, which most women will know, if you have a penis bash against your cervix, is very painful.
Mm-hmm.
That pain can be taken out quite easily as well. It seems that women store yogically any traumas. It doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It could just be the stress of having to work in a man's masculine way a lot.
Yeah.
Seems to get focused on the cervix and create a hardness and even a painness on the cervix. That can be taken out fairly quickly, about 5 to 10 minutes, through having it de-armored, or actually squeezing of the cervix and allowing the woman to express through kind of weeping and crying or screaming, to get that out of their body. And then the cervix can become extremely horny, and way hornier than the clitoris. Women say 5 to 10 times hornier than the clitoris. And then you can orgasm through things like the G spot, through the cervix, through womb orgasm, through full body orgasm. in way more pleasurable ways that you can feel for days afterwards, and allow the woman to be more in her feminine and not so much in her masculine energy in a way that she doesn't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, the most useful, easy takeaway thing to do for women. It's all written in my book, How to Do That.
Yeah.
And for the men, it's getting over the shame of their ass and learning how to de-armor their ass, which is about width, not depth, to get the elasticity back in the anus and allow to feel pleasure in the anus, because you can learn a lot. I mean, I learned basically about how the feminine wants to be fucked through being in that position. How do I want to feel surrendered? How do I want to feel taken? It's like, why is the guy just always sweet and nice? Why doesn't he somebody just grab me and take
Why
me?
is he what? I didn't hear that first bit. Why is he always doing what?
A lot of the complaints of women in first world countries is, okay, he's sweet and nice, but why won't he sometimes just grab me and take me and fuck me? You know, and I always thought that was a bit. It wasn't a nice way to treat women. I should just be sweet and nice. I didn't know that there is a healthy yearning in women to sometimes just be taken and swept off their feet and fucked, and to be able to feel healthily small in relation to the masculine. So
that just brought me
I
back to
learned that.
Dirty Little Slut, which sounded like the shaming version of healthily small.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. Interesting. Sorry, what were you going to say?
So that's the two takeaways. I would say the fastest way to improve your sex life for men and women is through the de-armouring process. And that can be done in the privacy of your own home, by yourself or with a partner.
Yeah,
Doesn't
so
matter
you can
gender,
just read the instructions in your book and de-armor your own vagina or ass.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Is it not better to do with someone else?
Well, it's more fun.
Yes.
And then, women can also de-armor their own anuses, and then you've got 3 holes operating instead of 2 if you want. And a lot of women.
I'm going to have so much to tell my girls at dinner tonight.
Right, exactly.
How long do you think they'll sit with me for?
Well, maybe wait till the food's over. We'll start talking about ass de-armoring or something.
Amazing. Well, I'm actually with them. I've got to the stage where they don't. Well, the little one who's 10 still wants to talk about sex, but the 14-year-old, like it's over. And I'm glad I sort of slipped as much sex talk as I could in, to her childhood up at this point to try.
Right. Once they go through puberty, there's the whole sexual shame. Once they start orgasming on the clitoris, whatever, the whole sexual shame thing starts, and they don't want to talk about it. So, yeah, I'm all for, if the child wants to know, to answer their questions honestly, and because kids have kids are brought up without shame. They have a natural, curiosity, and I remember. Playing doctors and nurses, and a lot of people who play doctors and nurses and things, they play with both sexes. It's about 98% will actually play with both genders. It's only later that you're shamed into only the opposite sex.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that that's changing. I mean, I definitely see with my daughters, they don't have, like, for them, bisexuality is not a weird thing, or being a lesbian or a gay man.
I think especially for women, they're very accepting of other women being bisexual. The problem with women is that it's often about themselves. They accept in others, but not so much themselves. Men, there is just a huge shame both ways. Often there's a repulsion of other men being bisexual, especially in themselves, because men have a lot more teasing and so on. It's not a big teasing thing often for girls, but for boys,
right,
especially like in America, Australia, there can be a lot of shaming in that area.
Right. The idea that masculinity is some kind of final identity, and if you start unraveling, there'd be nothing left. And I just wonder as well, in your journey of opening the box in all sorts of ways, whether, do you ever have that feeling of like, no, there, that you wish it was more simple, or do you just love the exploration so much you don't care?
I mean, when I was a youth, I remember thinking that I would kill myself if a guy, raped me and anally penetrated me. There was a huge amount of fear and shame around it. So I had to, consciously make a decision to lean into that edge and explore it. And
Mm.
I think, like most men, it's a terrifying thing. But once you've done it, and once you've kind of logically, like, what is the problem? If two adults of the same sex want to explore, it doesn't hurt anyone else. The more developed the country is, the more developed the person is. Logically, I guess they can get around that, but that's a different thing to doing it emotionally. To really feel like, what, because it does shake you to your core, your identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who am I?
That's right.
If I, became sexually aroused with someone of the same sex.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting that it's so linked with identity, isn't it?
it is. It's a very strong anti-egoic practice.
Yeah, and actually, I was wondering because I noticed that you're under your book, you're publishing under Alexa. Do you go back and forth between Alexa and Alex?
Yes, I'm gender fluid. So now I'm more in
Yeah.
describing in my masculine. So I'm talking. I notice my voice change. Although I don't try
Mm,
to change it, my voice changes quite.
interesting.
And the way I kind of think. So when I'm in my masculine, I'm more about solving problems, and
Hmm.
explaining things, and logically working stuff out.
Yeah.
Am I winning? Am I failing? But in my feminine, it's more like, oh, is that woman more pretty than me? Or look at her earrings, look at her
Hmm.
shoes, look at her
Hmm.
dress.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's more the feminine psyche creeps in, and I notice it quite significantly. Maybe more, I notice my feminine more because I have this juxtaposition of being able to look at, from Alex, I can look at Alexa and study her. And I see, as I go backwards and forwards, um, I do notice the difference. And that for me is a very interesting thing is, okay, who's better suited in this situation?
Mm.
So very often I'll teach the more empathic feeling energy stuff I'll do in my feminine. If I'm doing the more meditation stuff, I'll do it as Alex. So I can choose which persona is better suited to
Mm.
teach or work or explore or just simply be in leisure time. Who would enjoy more? So I could ride motorbikes, I kite surf, I used to be a big mountaineer person. I used to do a lot of extreme masculine sports and still do to some extent, driving my Jeep and so on. But then I'm also extremely feminine when I go into that. And I find to be able to explore both worlds, very, very interesting.
It sounds like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah, it is good fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a aspiration for complete fusion at some point where it
No,
doesn't
no,
become a conversation? No.
no, because I find that the androgynous is very interesting. And I find a lot of, it's interesting enough, a lot of women are very sexually interested in the androgynous as well.
Mm.
The ability to be very masculine or very
Yeah.
feminine is quite interesting. So I wouldn't want to just always be
But not
feminine.
neutral, right? So because there is
No.
that point in androgyny where it's you can't tell, right? You're riding
Yes,
that edge between the two, which I find interesting personally.
yes, and even in a lot of the very high level models now, there's been this androgynous look for several
Mm,
years,
mm-hmm.
where you kind of look at that person and go, "Wow, is that a really cute boy or a really slightly
Yeah,
tomboyish girl?" And I've
right.
always loved the tomboy looking girl. I love tomboys.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that
because
too.
to me, it's interesting. You can be with a woman who can really sexually surrender and feminine, but then go out motorcycle riding with you the next day. I find that
Yeah,
interesting as well.
yeah, yeah. Very cool. I wanted to ask you before we wrap about David Dada, because you trained under him, didn't you?
Yeah, I did quite a few of his workshops and things. Yeah.
Because he was sort of really I guess he was kind of the main guy in this space. It's hard for me
Yes,
to get a handle on yeah.
yes. I mean, I think his books are great, and he
Yeah.
certainly got to mainstream. Some of the very important masculine, feminine things in the three stages. I think is very interesting work that he's done. Yeah, he's a
Yes.
very intelligent guy. I've got a lot of respect for David.
Yeah, I agree. And I must say, I enjoyed his first book, Wild Nights, so much. It made me laugh so much. It's sort of like, I think it was 70s, right? This sort of 70s
80s.
orgies. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, 80s orgies on a Greek island. I was like, Damn.
Well, no, it wasn't on a Greek island.
Oh, was it?
The main character is
Oh,
called Mykonos, but
okay.
that
So
was
that
all
was my
in
fantasy.
California and Hawaii. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Still, California and Hawaii, cosmic orgies. It's pretty good
yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah,
wait,
one of my favorite books. Love that.
yeah, it was amazing. So, but you also trained under Mykonos?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to talk too much about this stuff because these guys are very secretive, and
Okay.
I respect their privacy, so I don't want to comment too much on all that.
All right. Sure. Sure. Okay. Well, this has been great. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add. I feel like you've left me with a lot to think about and some homework.
Well, yeah, it's all fun. It's all fun. So
Yeah.
very nice to talk to you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Lovely talking to you as well. Thank you, dear.